everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today for this DonorBox Academy hosted webinar. My name is Jenna, and I am the nonprofit advocate here at DonorBox, and I will be the host for this webinar today. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with DonorBox, we provide nonprofits with simple, effective, and affordable tools to manage their fundraising activities and connect with supporters on a deeper level. To date, we have helped over 80,000 organizations from all around the world raise over $2 billion in donations. So you can learn more about DonorBox at DonorBox.org. And today I am so excited to be joined by Chad Barger to talk about annual reports. We are nearing the year's end, folks, so I think that this topic is very timely. We could tell that folks were excited about this one. So a little bit more about our guest today. Chad helps nonprofit professionals fundraise more efficiently and effectively. He is the founder of the firm Productive Fundraising, which focuses on bringing actionable research-based fundraising tactics to small and mid-sized nonprofits. He is a top-rated conference speaker and webinar presenter, as well as a master trainer of boards that don't want to fundraise. I love this. Yes. Chad is also a strategic advisor and coach to many nonprofit fundraisers, executive directors, and board members. And he takes great pride in being a qualified curator of top-notch fundraising news and research through his weekly fundraiser Chad e-blast and popular free monthly webinar series. So you guys, we are definitely in great hands today. I'm really eager to learn from Chad. But before I pass it over, just a couple of quick notes for you. Please note that this session will be about an hour long, including time at the end for Q&A. So please, please, please ask questions in the chat throughout this presentation. I'll be busy behind the scenes marking those questions so that we can get to as many as we can during our Q&A. And yes, this webinar is being recorded. We've got you covered, and you'll receive the recording and the link to the resources via email within the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. All right, without further ado, Chad, I am going to go behind the scenes and I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you to the DonorBox team for coordinating and putting the sound here. I love that we are talking about annual reports before the year has even ended, because so often we start talking about annual reports when it's like, oh, maybe my report should go out next week. So we're planning ahead. Thank you to all of you for taking initiative. I know it's a busy month, lots are going on, but yes, so really looking forward to this, and I have a ton of content crammed into here, so I'm just going to hop right in, and I'm going to start with what maybe we don't want to do. Let's look at some annual report samples. The honor roll of donors, right? This is kind of a back in the day thing. You know, when I started my career in fundraising over 20 years ago now, I was working in higher ed, and my first 2 weeks were spent proofing the honor roll of donors. Do we have them spelled correctly? All of that. As we'll talk about, donors aren't so really concerned about that anymore, and they're interested in something more than just seeing their name printed in a list. Then we open our annual report, and usually we're right here. First thing, letter from the executive director. Dear friends, right? I don't have the warm fuzzies, right? I like the executive director, you know, all is good, but maybe starting with that is not the best use of our report. And then we turn the page and we get to charts after charts after charts. Our program growth, and okay, I'm glad things are growing, but again, you're not really telling me your story, which is what we're going to talk about today through your annual report. It reminds me of a time that I'm a fundraising consultant trainer, so I attend a lot of nonprofit events for my clients. And one time I was at an annual dinner, and I'm sitting down, and I'm sitting next to Mary. This is not Mary, but this is a striking resemblance to Mary. And Mary says, we do pleasantries, and she learns what I do, and she starts to tell me everything she hates about what the nonprofits she supports do. All right, she just has this laundry list. And one of the things Mary says is she says, that annual report that they send me, it's this big, thick thing. I really don't want to read it. I keep up with my groups I support. I don't really need it, but I feel guilty just throwing it out because I know how much effort they've put into it, how much energy and how much time and printing costs and postage. So I sit down and read it, but I'm never really that excited. Do we want our donors to feel guilted into reading our annual report? No. So let's design something that they're actually excited to read. So that's the game plan today. We're going to walk through, I'm not going to read through all this, but what donors want, our goal, talk a little bit about storytelling because we need to infuse that storytelling into our annual report. So many nonprofits are great at storytelling all year long, and then they get to the annual report and it's just this boring thing with no stories in it. And it should really be the recap and the highlights of our best stories throughout the year. We'll do lots of do's and don'ts, and I will close with tons of samples for you. Jenna will share this link in the chat for you a few times today, but my slides, free resource library, tons of different stuff, all on my website. That's the link. We got the pop-up there, so we'll make sure you get all kinds of information here, tons of follow-up. That's the fundraiser Chad style. Everything has to be actionable. What do I do with this information? All right, so our goal is reporting impact and thanking donors, not putting out an annual report, right? Reporting impact and thanking donors. That's what we want to do. So in our fundraising cycle, it's this green box right here, this stewardship box, which connects the circle and allows us to go through it again, right? That's our key. So it links it. Otherwise, it's just a one-time transaction. So it kind of closes that loop. What did you actually do with my support? It helps with this problem. 43%, the average donor retention rate in the US. And I haven't updated this yet because I don't have final data, but I think we're going down a little bit in recent years too. So keeping more of our donors by showing them what we did with their support. We always ask the question in everything we do in fundraising, have we made our donors feel important, valued, and considered? Important, valued, and considered. Or just like a piggy bank, right? I had a donor once tell me, I give because your organization makes me feel like a trusted partner and not just like a piggy bank, right? That's what we're after. And the annual report can be a tool to help us do that. It's also one of our touch points. It's a donor touch point. We reach out to donors. We don't ask for anything. That counts as a touch point. The fundraising lull of 7, coming out of research done over 20 years ago and then repeated a number of years ago by Penelope Burke and Cygnus Research, coming from the book Donor-Centered Fundraising. We get the lull of 7. Donors want to hear from us at least 7 times between solicitations where we don't ask for anything. We simply thank, we report, we let them know what's going on, we give updates. An annual report can be one of those tools. Okay, so some general writing guidelines and a little bit about storytelling before we get to the structure of the annual report. Because if you take nothing else today, I want you to take away that I need to tell stories in my annual report. And my annual report needs to lead with a story. And it should be my best story of the year. And if I already told that story, that's fine. Think of the annual report as like our greatest hits album of the year. All the best stories, all the best stuff coming through there. But let's dig into a little bit of fundraising writing guidelines and storytelling. At the end, I'll give you a book reference that if you are new to fundraising, if you haven't done a ton of writing, it's a great, you can read it in one afternoon and it will teach you everything you need to know about how to be a great fundraising writer. So to make that donor feel valued, important, and considered, our writing must tell a compelling story, first and foremost, of which the donor is a hero, And sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. It depends on the context. In a fundraising appeal letter, we definitely do it. In an annual report, we will do it some. We might tone it down a little bit. In our general organization correspondence that's going to be seen by everybody, we don't do it. So it's a little bit of this debate between donor-centric versus community-centric fundraising. I'm of the belief that they both serve a purpose. The key is knowing our audience and using the right one at the right time. Number 3, it begins with an intention-getting opening sentence. The rest doesn't matter if they don't read it or they instantly start skimming. And 4th, we don't ask for anything. We are not asking them for anything in this because we are telling a story. We are reporting impact. That story, it's a compelling story about one, right? One person, place, or thing. Ideally, a person. We don't tell a story about the 3,227 people we helped last year. We tell a story about Martha and when she came to us and what the problem was and how we met that problem. And then we talk about how there are 455 other Marthas out there that we wish we could help, but we don't have the resources to do that yet. Right? In that story, we give rich detail. They can picture Martha and her challenges and what was going on. Right? And it's a solvable problem. That's really why we talk about one, because my $100 can really help Martha. But my $100 doesn't do much at all to help that 3,000 whatever number I said. Right? So one. People always ask, how do I get these stories? You know, I'm on the development team, I'm the director, I have a million other things to do. I'm not in the programs, I don't see them firsthand. So you need to connect yourself to the programs. I spent a number of years as a museum development director, and my office was upstairs in a cubicle away from the exhibits. I didn't see the school groups come in. I didn't hear the stories. So my technique was once a month or so, I'd grab a dozen donuts on the way into work. I'd put them in the volunteer break room, and then I would hop on the radio and say, hello, docents, thank you so much for your service. There are free donuts in the volunteer break room, help yourself. And then I would run in and sit beside my box of donuts. And every time a volunteer would take a donut, I would say, tell me something amazing that's happened in the museum lately. What's been going on? I know we had a school group last week. What fun thing did you see? And just kind of picking their brain a little bit and looking for those gems. And then finding something and then could get more detail. And then I could go up and take that story and craft it into what we wanted for our use. But getting those gems, finding little ways to connect with the program staff. Either you're getting out there or you're finding ways to do that so we get those stories. Once we get a couple great stories, fabulous. Let's use them and use them a lot, right? An annual report, I said, view it as a greatest hits collection. So maybe we sent out, 2 or 3 newsletters this year, 2 or 3 appeals. Ideally, they all told a story. So now we're at like 4 to 6 stories. I'm going to pull the 3 best ones and maybe add a new one too if I have it. And let's use those in the annual report. We can even go back multiple years, pull other things out. Pull a great story we told 4 years ago, tell it in the annual report, and at the end, put a little note. You might remember we shared this story about Joe with you 4 years ago. We're pleased to report that Joe is still doing well. In fact, Joe now comes and volunteers with our organization to help other people, just like people that were in the situation he was. So that little update, that can work. You don't always have to have all fresh content. And a lot of our donors, they're not even going to remember those stories. Did they read them the first time? And if they did read them and they remember that, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember that story. It's great. I'm glad they're still doing that. All is good. Your mission statement is not your story. Our nonprofit mission statements tend to be pretty horrible. They tend to look something like this. I snapped the photo of this at a presentation years and years ago by the great Tom Ahern, one of our great copywriters in the field. But yeah, it's not your mission. It's your story. Tell me how you fulfilled that mission through serving one person, one individual, one beneficiary. I mentioned the donor is the hero, right? When appropriate, we use language that makes them feel and gives them credit for making this happen, because we couldn't have done it without their support. It's so often the technique is to use the word you and your, right? You and your. Without you, none of this would have happened. Because of you, Johnny has a safe place to sleep tonight. It's about the donor, you and your, not the organization, my, we, our, right? I like to kind of leave the organization out of it. We're either talking about the donor or the community. Those are the ones that fuel into us and create this great impact. Number 3, that begins with an attention-getting opening sentence. You've got to pull them in. That first sentence, and it can't be, I see this so often. In the pre-chat, I was speaking with Jenna, and I just finished proofing my last fundraising appeal letter for the year. They were a little late, should have been done maybe 2 weeks ago at the latest, but I did 43 appeal letters this year. So they all blend together, but I see it so often. People want to start an appeal letter or anything with, let me tell you a story. And then they go into the story. No, let me tell you a story doesn't get my attention. It just tells me that you're going to tell me a story. Instead, we go right into the story with lines like, just the other day, Monica came into our office with a big problem. Or last week, I was walking down the hall and came across something magical. And this is one of my favorite techniques. Partially because I get to say the fun word automatopoeia, which some of us might remember from grade school and grammar classes. But it's that writing out the sounds. So here we go. Drip, drip, drip. That was the steady sound coming from the ceiling, right? We go into the story just like that. That gets people's attention. So that first sentence has to pull them in. So they read it and they don't start skimming. And that last one, while not asking for anything, right? Not asking for anything. My good friend, the great Lynn Wester, with donorrelations.com, the DRG group, she says, thank or ask. Do not fask, right? Don't mesh them together. When we're thanking donors, we thank them. When we're asking donors, we ask, right? When we put them together, it's muddled. It doesn't feel genuine. So in an annual report, we are not asking. We are thanking. We are reporting impact. She also says it's our job and our joy to give our donors the impact reporting that they deserve. So view the annual report as a joyful process. This is like, yeah, I mean, we're bragging about all the great stuff our organization did this year. It shouldn't come across as braggy, but this is fun. This is like the rock star report, you know, like, yes, we are amazing. We never write, we are amazing in it. Instead, we say, because of your amazing support, this happened. But it's fun. It should be a fun process. All the good news is coming forward. Just a quick note, Lynn has tons of amazing resources on her website, including like stewardship pieces. So if you're struggling with design for your annual report, you can go and get one of her group's swipe files. It's usually like a 500-page PDF of just tons of samples that have been submitted. And you literally just sit there and you press page down until you see something that strikes you and just fly by. And you're like, oh, that's a great idea. So easy little way to get some inspiration. I have that linked up on the resources page for you. All right. We've talked about how we tell the story. That's what comes first. And there should be multiple stories throughout our annual report. Now let's get into the mechanics of the report itself. What should we do? What shouldn't we do? Spend some time here, and then we'll wrap with a few examples before we get to your questions. All right, I spent our whole first 20 minutes on this. Stories is the key, but what everybody wants to share in an annual report is the statistics, right? So we did, the 27,000 hours of tutoring, served 32,000 meals, whatever it is. We want to list all of this. And there's a place for that. I do agree that some of that should be in there, but that should not be the whole report. You need more than that. So we need that story to come first, and then we can get to some statistics. We don't lead with our charts. I saw a mention in the chat earlier, what's the legal requirements on reporting and financials? Yes, I recommend having some financials in there, but those can be a lot later, and we don't need a ton of detail. Where the revenue come from and where the money go. 2 pie charts can work really well. Not tons and tons of boring charts. So this is kind of nicely done. This is a good mix of, here's our income, where it came from, here's our expenses. Diversity statistics are important to them. They reported them. There's a few other statistics, but it's not just a boring little chart. It's pulled out, has some theme. We still got some photos on this page. And look, it's only taking up like 1/3 of the page, right? Everything else is telling the story and sharing great photos of our mission of impact in action. We can give a statistic, but I would rather tell a story. And how do you connect the two? At the end of that story, we say something like, Justine's story is just one of many from this past year. Through your support, we've been able to help 384 families like hers. We connect it. So tell a story about one, connect it to the overall, and connect it to that need. If you're going to do charts, I love getting creative with them. This is Feeding America, so hunger insecurity type organization. Look what they did with their charts. There's their expenses and revenue, but it's made up with food. That is their mission. What could that look like at your organization? Some kind of image filled partially by various pieces. I don't know. But this just made the charts a lot more interesting. We can have a little bit of fun and creativity in our annual reports. Next, mail it. And email it too. But don't just email it. Right? This is an opportunity to get something in their mailbox other than just solicitation. So many organizations I start working with, and they've taken their newsletter to online, so it's only email. Maybe they're doing a monthly or a quarterly, but it's only email. And then the only time they send actually something to people's postal mailboxes is once or twice a year when they're doing an appeal. And a lot of people, have rules or things in place that route that email to a set folder, which I don't really read. I just kind of skim. To get me to read it, you got to have a really attention-getting opening line, a subject line to pull me in. So we need to get something else in their box. And I think an annual report is a great way to do it. And as you're going to see later, I'm not talking about 20-page annual reports. These are short things, so it's not going to cost that much either. But you got to get something in here a few times a year. I love postcards for this reason. Those can work. And yes, you can do a postcard annual report. I will show you an example here in a little bit, but get something in their box. You also email it as well. And folks, I don't care if they instantly pitch it. I don't care if they don't read your mailed report. I need them to have an experience. So, all right, I got something. I'm going to my mailbox. I'll pick it up right in here. Oh, what's this? Oh, ABC nonprofit. I like them. I support them. They're doing good stuff. Oh, look, it's their annual report. Looks like they had a good year. Great. Trash. That's fine. I don't need them to review everything. I need them to have that experience. Oh, look, this nonprofit. Oh, look, they're telling me what they did. They're actually reporting back on my donation. I like them. I can trust them. Connotation, maybe I could trust them a little bit more, right? So it's fine. Don't worry about how much they read, but we need to get something out there. And we want them to interact with us on multiple channels. Donors that interact in multiple channels, so email, mail, I come to your event, I'm active on social media. More channels means 75 times greater lifetime value, and they stick around more too, 11 years longer. So getting them to interact multiple ways. The favorite technique too, put the report in something. And I like a bigger envelope, like this is a booklet envelope. So it's like kind of like greeting card size. It's a half fold instead of a trifold. Excuse me, it stands out from the rest of the mail. And people say, oh, I wonder what this is, and it'll get opened. Number 3, Less text, more photos. We're telling stories, but they can be short stories, right? Short stories with the photo telling the same story. The photo often tells the story better than we actually can do it. So here's an example. We even have statistics on this page, not a story, but the photo is really telling the story right here. Right? So big, great imagery, lots of photos. Making sure we have those. Repeating photos we've used earlier in the year. That all makes sense. Keep it short, maintain white space. You send something crammed in, you're trying to get it into 2 pages, and we're using 9-point font, and it's all there. They're not going to read it. It just looks like too much. All right, so open it up, lots of white space. If it's got to be small, that either means you're doing too short of a format or you have too much stuff. And I lean towards number 2. It's usually you're trying to get too much stuff in there. Share 1 or 2 great stories. Have some photos. Share the minimum statistics you need. Call it a day. Okay? That's fine. Look at this great photo use and white space. Well, I mean, there's more white space than anything else here, but it's inviting. I'm really pulled in to read these little things that relate to each of these animals, right? Because you showed photos, it doesn't look intimidating. Yeah, I can do this quickly. All is good. White space, right? Yeah, more room to think. I agree, Jenna. Next up, send them elsewhere for the boring stuff. So we've seen some questions about what about my audit and 990 and giving them access to more information. Yes, you can give them access, but you don't have to include all of it. We don't have to do the huge chart. We can send them to our website if they actually care. So this example I showed earlier, down there at the bottom, it says to view full audited financials, go to this website. And now we have an even better way to do this because QR codes finally work. I struggle with the, yep, Carol just said it, yep. I struggle with the term benefit of the pandemic, but one of them was that our restaurant friends taught everyone how to use a QR code because that was how you got your menu. And they are working now. They didn't work before, they work now. So put in a QR for more details, for a full audit, for full financial statements, scan here. And it just goes to a page deep in your website that they can click, download a PDF, something like that. We don't have to get tons and tons of detail in our report right there. They should be everywhere now. I'm having a lot of fun actually including QR codes in appeal letters and other things. It says scan here to see a video of this program in action. Right? They come to our website, watch the video, and for an appeal letter, it redirects to our giving page. But in an annual report, it might redirect to, sign up for our e-blast or something like that, something a little softer. Next up, no list of donor names. I know some organizations still do it. That's now in the minority of organizations. Most organizations have stopped doing this. Higher ed and large hospital systems are probably the ones still most likely to do it. But donors just don't care, especially individual donors. Individual donors sometimes say, I would rather you not list my name because the other nonprofit down the street is going to take your honor roll of donors and add me to their database, and then I'm going to get solicited by them. My arts organizations, especially my symphonies, are the most ones that hold on to this, that they want to publish that program. I know for a fact that tons of organizations in your community take your program and go through your donor list and say, oh, they don't give to us. Maybe we should figure out who that is, right? I'm not of a scarcity mindset. I want us all to work together. But if donors don't really care, and maybe it's making other folks solicit our donors, why does this make sense? The one area where it does sometimes matter and people care would be corporate. Our sponsors, our corporate supporters, sometimes our foundation supporters, they want the recognition. So let's list just them. Or we could put a link or a QR code that says, for a list of our supporters, come here, rather than taking the space and more expense for something that donors don't seem to care about as much as they used to. It's a sign of changing times, much more private. Folks are kind of less concerned about publicity. I've had multiple capital campaigns in the last 5 years where less than half of the donors actually wanted a naming opportunity, even though they qualified for it. Right? They just said, no, I don't really want that recognition. I'm happy to support this. I care deeply, but I don't need my name on something. I don't really want that recognition. We are much more private with our philanthropy. So we have changed that way. So maybe our annual report changes that way as well. Next one will be a hard one for some of you. Omit or hide the boring executive director letter. I have never seen an amazing executive director letter because it's always coming from the organization. It rarely tells a story. It's going to cram some statistics in there that we repeat later, but they just aren't great. So if you can't get it out altogether, let's at least not have it be page 2, like the first thing you see as soon as you open it. Let's put it a little later, like maybe the bottom of page 4 is the update from the executive director. See if we can at least move it and get our great story first. And if your executive director wants to tell that great story in their voice, so be it, but you can't have the heading, greetings or letter from the executive director above it. You got to have something that pulls them in because most people see that and they instantly want to skip. So yeah, this is not how it starts right in the beginning. Add personal touches for key donors. Okay, personal touches for key donors. How do I do that? I'm getting this thing mass printed. I'm having, 1,200 copies of it. Well, once we get that 1,200 copies, we can control how it goes out. So maybe for some segment, and I don't like just major donors. I say major donors here. I say key donors, right? I don't even say major. I say key donors. So what are key groups that we want to do a little more? So yes, maybe our largest givers, but what about maybe our new donors too, our brand new donors, or people that have converted to monthly giving in the last year? These kind of key groups that they did something that showed us behavior that they're really committed to do something. So maybe pooling that groups from the mailing and hand addressing their envelopes, putting little notes on there. A Post-it note on the front of an annual report signed by a human, especially someone they know, makes it personal correspondence, not just something that, the computer and the mail house spit out. So a little bit of time and attention can really help us that way too. This is my tip for anybody that's a major gift officer, has a caseload or a prospect group. I like to, about 2 weeks after it's mailed, send an email to this donor group with the PDF of the annual report attached. And you say, I just wanted to make sure you saw the impact of your support. Our annual report was mailed 2 weeks ago. In case you didn't get it or see it, or it's buried in a stack of mail, here it is. And then if you can customize it even more and say, I know you love our after school program. There's a great story about that on page 7. So we're really meeting them where they're at and showing we understand and we care. We want to see this. And now I've gotten a second touch point out of our annual report. Next up, don't sweat the timing. I just posted this tip. Oh no, I have it coming up that we're going to post this. And every time I post this tip, I get this great discussion on social media because people instantly feel freed up and all the stress of an annual report goes away. So I say don't sweat the timing. Why? 98% of your donors have no clue when your fiscal year ends. Nonprofit fiscal years are all over the place. You got about 30% that have a July 1 start. You got about 30% that have a January 1 start, and everybody else is all over the place. So donors have no clue. I would bet that over half of your board of directors does not know when your fiscal year begins. So if our board doesn't even know, then why do we put this pressure on ourselves that we need to send an annual report out, within 2 months of the end of the fiscal year? Because that never works. We're waiting on financial data or something. Design takes forever, and then it ends up being like 3-4 months later anyway. No. Let's send the annual report when it makes sense for us. if we have time to compile it, I'm like, when do you usually have everything? So our fiscal year ends on December 31st, go into the audit process. We usually get our final audit like April 1st, and then stories and things. So I could have it pretty much ready and just waiting for financials, and we'll try to send it out May 1st. Fine, just get consistent. When does it work for you, right? Don't feel this pressure that isn't there from people that are sitting around waiting. So I wonder when the annual report will come from ABC Nonprofit. Their fiscal year ended 3 months ago. It should be here by now. No, that doesn't happen. Right? So forget about that pressure. When does it make sense for your organization and a schedule you can actually meet? Don't create unnecessary stress. We have plenty of stress in the sector and in fundraising. We don't need to create additional. Kind of starting to wrap up the tips here before we look at a few samples. Maybe call it an impact report or a gratitude report, right? Because that's really what it is. Annual report, that's just telling me time frame, right? I could report even more frequently, right? We could do a quarterly gratitude report or report twice a year. What cycle do you like? How much information do you have? If you insist on doing a 20-page annual report because you have all this stuff, then I'd rather see you do 2 or 3 reports a year and break that up. Something to think about. Here's an example. This organization does a quarterly impact report. Right? They send it out like this. This is their email blast, and you can click to download it. They, I believe they do small postcards at the same time, so it's a lot cheaper, and they're not mailing big report. They're not paying for production of the big report, but they send small postcards. That's why that looks postcard sized. It doesn't say click to download. I think it says scan the code on reverse, and we have a QR code or something like that, right? I don't know. Is that more work? Does that work better? What fits our organization? So yes, I've definitely seen gratitude report written as a title. All right, consider featuring a monthly donor or a volunteer. What behavior are you looking to see more of from your supporters? Well, most of us want more of them to become monthly. Maybe we want them to join a legacy society. We want them to volunteer. Featuring a person that has done that adds social proof, right? Where there is no ask, but we just simply feature one of our donors, them talking about why they support it. Says, oh yeah, that resonates with me. Maybe I want to do that too. And then magically, maybe 6 weeks later, a monthly donor conversion appeal shows up, and they still remember that experience and reading about that person. Or maybe we highlight that same person again in that conversion appeal. We're not asking in here, but we can still plant the seeds and prime a little bit for behavior that we'd love to see. Okay, before we get to your questions, I am going to share some samples. These samples are a wide mix. They are not exclusively all totally best practice. I'm more showing different formats here, but they all are pulling in some elements of this. So take them with a grain of salt, and you can improve these even more. But let's just look at some samples. So here are my preferred types. I've seen lots of questions about, how long, how big, what format. These are my preferred ways. So if you're going to do a traditional report, the printed, I'm mailing you something, keep it short. Keep it short. 1 to 6 pages is what I like. I don't love the 20-page report because just like Mary said in the beginning, I don't want to be guilted into reading this long thing that I don't really want to read. So short. I'm taking the pressure off, right? We can do a short report. As I mentioned, postcard reports. I love them. So usually I'll do jumbo, not the little guy. The little guy worked to send us to folks to our online report, as that last one just did. But a jumbo postcard, you can get a good bit on there. And we can send them to our website if they want more. But they have that simple experience of getting something in the mail. If you insist on sharing tons and tons of statistics, please at least make them interesting, right? Infographics. It adds a visual element to our statistics. That can help. You can do a video annual report. On the resources page, I have a sample of one for you. They don't have to be super fancy. It can be something done in like Canva or a photo collage, talking head, talking over as we show photos with some music. This sounds like a really fun job for probably somebody on your team that would love to put that together, or an intern, or a volunteer, all those kind of things. What is not on my list? Long reports, and also online only reports. If it's an online report, we need something in the mailbox that still sends people to it. Short reports. Let's look at some examples. Okay. One pager. This is a one-page impact report, right? So we still have photos. It's a little crammed in, but there's still white space. We have a massive chart. We have a little bit of a story at the top. Would certainly expand that story, cut down on maybe that big old chart, but it's still nice design. It's readable, and we have kind of an infographic for some of our stats. Just need to maybe get those numbers into a better format. Right? So that's one page. They probably missed out on the opportunity to use the back of the page and could have spaced this out, maybe added that full story and used that, but you can do a one-pager. Here's the two-pager. This is that same kind of format, but spreading it out over 2 pages. So there we have some statistics with our stories, great photos. Again, it just kind of needs, we're giving our statistics in sentence form, but what I'm really craving is that story about one person. But nice design, it's readable, simple little 2-pager. The 6-pager. This gets kind of to our more traditional format. So we have a nice cover sheet. It's kind of inviting. What is this? I want to open it up. And then look, we don't hop right to the letter from the executive director. Instead, we have this big infographic. Right? And on the right side, we have a success story. This is a really nice mix. Personally, I would flop the success story over on the left side because that's when people start reading, and I want them to read that first. But this is nicely done. Even the infographic has good spacing in there. Good little example. And look, back cover is where we crammed the letter from the executive director there at the top. And even that has a photo, right? It's open, and it says, thank you. There's our 2 little pie charts. And some of us insist on including a list of our board of directors. Yeah, it's fine, but it's on the back. If people want to see it, it's there. I like this example a lot. It's got white space. It does a lot of what we talked about today. It's 6 pages, but it's kind of a fold over, so it can still fold down and mail in that booklet envelope that we talked about. Very good example if you want to do a print report. This is a slightly different. We're going to booklet size. So now it's like the size of a greeting card. It still goes on the envelope, but we're going to open it up and see the pages. So here's a booklet style, telling the story. We do start with the message from the CEO on page 2, but look at that first line, with your support, right? It's talking about the donors right from the beginning. Could have started with a story, would have been better, but we have infographic. Now we get to the story. What I would do with this one is I would lead with this. I'd lead with this thank you from a client, which is kind of our story, the great photo, and go from there. Have charts that aren't crazy boring. There's another story from a client, so infusing that in can fit right in that bigger format envelope. I've talked about postcard reports. Some of you are saying, how in the world can you actually get an annual report on a postcard? Here's an example. Here's what they did. This is Legal Aid Works. They did this. This is the front of the postcard. It says annual report. There's because of you. Right there. We remind them of our mission. We got dollars raised in there. And the other side, we have a little infographic of what we did. It's not our whole story, but it's our story. And this is an older example, but now I would QR code it and say to see a video of this program in action, our programs in action, to hear a testimonial, to hear one of our individuals talk about their experience with the organization, scan here. You can make it omni-channel and interactive. Here's another one. This one really went all in on the infographic, but we've got everything right there. And on the back side, Tiny little letter from the executive director with a thank you, little reminder of what we do, how we get it done with our charts. I like these charts. I know they're tiny for you, but you can download the slides and zoom them up. Really, rather than numbers, it just breaks it down by program area and source. They don't really care if it's 63% or 92%. We're smart humans. We can understand that that slice of the pie is slightly less than half. So maybe it's like 40% or so. That's fine. Again, scan here to see full financial statements. Would work. Another one, right? Look at that front. Look at that photo. That pulls you in, right? 2017 annual report. Flip it over. Earlier on a slide, I mentioned die cut postcards. These are one of my favorite tools. I love these. So this is a postcard that I actually mailed. This is the front of it, and it's not a rectangle. The pink line you see going around the violin is a die cut line. So they cut it out. So I actually mailed a violin. That was the front. Here's the back. Because of you, 283,645 residents of the capital region had an arts experience last year. Thank you for your support. I sent this. I had donors calling me. Said, oh my gosh, Chad, I didn't know you could mail a violin. Like, this is crazy. So what did I do? The next year I mailed a ballet slipper, and then I mailed an artist palette and all of that. And friends, this is not more expensive than a jumbo postcard as long as you don't have to create the die, the thing that stamps it out, all right? So the key is just finding a partner that does this and already has a die that your graphic designer can just use and design within. So there are lots of companies out there that do this. One of mine that I don't have a relationship with, I don't get a kickback, which is why I share this in this presentation. Company out of Tampa called Think Shapes that have like 450 dies. So you can just look through their library, find something that works. But this gets your donors' attention, right? Contact information for them is there if you're interested. Infographic reports. Like, you can do the whole thing just as an infographic. I would rather you tell a story. Maybe we tell a story in an email, and then down below we put that infographic. But here's an example. This is an infographic annual report. Everything is in there. Again, it's more interesting. It's more visual than just the straight charts, the straight statistics, all of those things. And I kind of like this one. This is nice and simplistic. Even some of these images, like look at the rescues there, like that tells our story right there, the first aid treatments. So it's even icons that kind of help to do that as well. Again, best paired with a story with all of these other elements, but can be done simply just like this as well. Final one that I mentioned already, video reports. And we're going to a more and more video world. Everything is visual. Putting something on YouTube, maybe there's even TikTok annual reports now. I don't know, probably already exists. I'll have to look for an example, but we can do that, especially if you have something very exciting, visual. The example I share with you on the resources page is from a state park and forest foundation. So actually seeing the projects they've completed and the work and nature and being out there is far more powerful than just telling stories about it. So if you're kind of a visual organization like that, I think of arts groups a lot too, like actually taking them into little splashes of performances and things could be a lot of fun, but you can tell your story that way. Let your mission, let your actual visual and seeing it tell the story rather than doing it just in words, but could be a fun tool as well. And a video component to any report through that QR code that we've talked about a good bit today could really make a lot of sense. So, all right, video reports. That was the last one. I'm going to wrap it up here and get to your questions. I always love to share additional fundraising resources. Where do I go to learn more? Do things like that. So one of the ways is I'm on social media. I go by Fundraiser Chad. I'm always sharing lots of great content I'm seeing, upcoming webinars, new research. I'm most active on Facebook and LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to connect there, and that's a channel of choice for you. I do a book recommendation. I referenced it earlier. This is my favorite way to teach people how to write. It's just out of reach for me on my book stack, or I'd show it to you, but it is super thin. I think it is maybe 120, 40 pages or so, and pretty big font, lots of white space. You can read this in an afternoon. This teaches you how to do fundraising writing, and Vicki agrees. It is a great book. And last I checked, it's still like 20 bucks or so on Amazon, so not a huge investment either. I believe I have that linked up on the resources page as well. Final thing, I do a free monthly webinar as well, and mine is actually tomorrow, short notice, but tomorrow I will be doing the top actionable fundraising tips, tools, and resources that I discovered in 2023. So what was new? What did I add? All kind of full range of fundraising, lots of various tips and tricks. I got to finalize that deck once I get off here today, but I'm excited about what's in there. Lots of great, practical, actionable fundraising tips for all of you. And that is at 1 Eastern tomorrow. And you sign up for that through Zoom on the resources page as well. With that, it is time for questions and comments. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for that. That was such a great session. I'm sitting here writing my own notes and nodding my head along. I especially appreciate where you took the pressure off of us by saying, do what fits your organization. Before we went out live on this webinar, I was venting to you, there hasn't been an annual report that hasn't stressed me out to tears, right? And that's because I always had in my mind, this is a 20-pager. It's got all this data, all the statistics, but it really can be within your own timing, in your own format, in your own title. It's that transparency, it's that storytelling, it's uplifting your donors' impact that really is the thing that matters, right?
Right.
So
I'll take it a step further. Like in my mind, the only things that really matter with timelines are getting your end of calendar year appeal out at the right time so it hits, because we have that 12/31 deadline for our donors, and getting your event invitations out soon enough so that people actually have time to register for your event. Everything else is pretty much self-imposed pressure. And as long as we're just regularly communicating with our donors, we're fine.
Words to live by. I appreciate that. Now, before we dive into Q&A, I do want to point our attendees to a helpful DonorBox resource. So we have got a blog on DonorBox's reporting templates. So this is a step-by-step guide to help you easily extract reports for your donor overview, your new donor reports, and your live bunch. So as you're segmenting your communications for year's end and pulling all that data, there's an easy way to do that within your donor dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that blog link now. So go ahead and check it out. It's just an easy way to save a little bit of time as you're pulling all this good stuff together. And okay, now on to Q&A. And Chad, I know that you answered some questions throughout the presentation. I would like to read some of them out loud so we have them for the recording as well, so people really get the goods. So I'm going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And now we just talked about this one, so we'll highlight it very quickly. Whitney was very timely, 5 minutes into the webinar, asked, what's your advice about when to send annual reports? So, you know, to sum it up, when it works for you, right? All right, so Stephanie asked, I'm a new nonprofit. Is an annual report a requirement or just a best practice?
I will put on my not a lawyer hat, not an accountant hat. I do not know regulations for all states, all provinces, all areas of the world. In my area, what is required is your annual 990 disclosure, which is not a fun, sexy thing to send to donors, right? So it's kind of taking that data and making it more donor friendly. But technically, check with your, I would check with your state, Department of State typically will have the reporting requirements for nonprofits and see what they are. So I'll just leave it there.
Perfect. Now, Paula asked, do you pick just one donor to highlight in an annual report, or would you choose multiple or not at all?
I would prefer if we have the space, like if we're doing something like that 6-pager that has a little more room, or we're sending people to our website where we could highlight. I like to do one of like each desired behavior I want. So maybe one monthly donor, one brand new donor, one 20-year loyal donor, you know, so just kind of that way. So, you know, you can think of that. I could see like a nice page on an annual report with like 4 boxes filling it up of 4 quick donor profiles might be a nice page.
I like that suggestion. Now, another one. So does the mailed annual report need to match the email annual report? So if you mail a postcard, do the amount of pages need to match in the email or the formatting? What is your best practice for using the same content or not using the same content? Or what would you say there?
I don't necessarily have a best practice here, but I'll pull what I like to do with solicitations is that I like to mail something and then 2 weeks later send an email that uses the same photo, tells the same story, but now all of a sudden I have a live donation button right there. So my mind's kind of going the same way that, yes, maybe it's a shorter mailed piece like a postcard, and then the email, like maybe it's longer or linking to something else, but they kind of, at least visually, design ways link together, even if it's not all the same content.
That makes sense. And talking about different formats, do you find, for your own preference, an optimal page count? What do you think resonates the most with readers? Everybody's different, but what do you?
Yeah, I care less about number of pages and more just about overall, the shorter the better typically. How much content do we need? Is this truly all engaging? What actually needs to go in? And I think you probably picked up that my preference is I like that 6-pager, but I will say it, and this is one of my key fundraising idioms: personal preference does not equal fundraising best practice, right? What we like, what our executive director likes, what our board likes, what our development committee likes does not matter. What matters is what works, right? So I know what doesn't work is the long, boring report. So we're just going completely in the other direction, and you figure out where that lands for you.
You had a great post on LinkedIn today or yesterday about that personal preference, and it was like an aha moment, right? What works is what works.
I never go viral. That thing almost went viral, so that was fun.
Yeah, you had a lot of engagement on that one. So folks should find Chad on LinkedIn and follow along. He's got lots of goodies.
Yeah, that's a great lapsed donor reactivation letter sample, which I just put together, that a client of mine actually had a 23% lapsed donor reactivation rate, which trounces the industry average of 4%. So it was a cool resource and led to a great little discussion. So.
That's pretty major. Okay, we are chugging along. We have just a couple more minutes, so we'll do our very best. We're nearly there. So Jill asked, without financials and donor lists, how would this vision of an annual report differ from just an impact report?
It's an impact report once a year. It's basically the same thing, and I'm fine with that.
Awesome.
I don't really do a test. Do it one time, omit the stuff, see what happens. My guess is you're going to hear from 3 people, and they're not going to stop giving. They're just used to the way it's always been because they've been giving to you for 20 years, and they're used to the way the annual report looks. They're not upset or angry. They're just, it's different. And I care about this organization, so I reached out and wanted to know what's going on. But no, they're the same.
Easy enough. You already talked about having these reports called gratitude reports. You've seen this. This is a cool approach. Now, another question. Actually, I think this might be our last one. Could you please reshare the resource that had all those examples? You said it was like 300 pages or 500 pages that folks could just...
that is, if you just go to donorrelations.com, that is Lynn Wester's site, the DRG group, and go into their resources. I think you have to give an email address, but she sends good stuff, and then you just get into these files and you click and literally download this PDF, and it's just tons and tons of samples. She does it for like event invitations, gift acknowledgements, all kinds of stuff. So whenever I need inspiration, I just go grab one of those.
Wonderful. And maybe Kara can dig up that link for us as we're closing out the session. I think we've made our way through everything. Now, folks, if for some reason we missed your question, please feel free to reach out to us. So you can reach out to us at academy@donorbox.org. And I am grateful to say that Chad is in our circle of, professionals that we look to and trust. So any questions related to this? I'm going to relaunch his resource library. You've got the goods there. You should have everything you could possibly need to get your annual reports going. But again, you can reach out to us at academy@donorbox.org, and we can always answer the questions that you're looking for, right? Now, Chad, again, I want to thank you. I know this is a busy time of year as we're wrapping everything up. We truly appreciate your expertise. I know folks in the chat were saying this is one of the best presentations they've attended all year. So thank you for all that you do to teach others and for sharing that knowledge with us. And to everyone here, thank you for all that you do to serve others. We are so proud and grateful to provide the tools and resources that you need to do so. So go off and have a great year end, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Happy fundraising.
Happy fundraising.